Good enough? I've known him quite a while. He's a very smart guy. He's going to talk to you about spying on your employees and determining which one is the terrorist.
That's pretty good, yeah. So, yeah, thanks everyone. I guess the survey thing isn't going to happen. I was really tempted to make up some results of the survey and share that instead. So I'm just going to, this is a turbo talk, so I don't have any slides or anything like that, and I just want to throw out something that we started doing pretty recently. I think it's pretty interesting. Some of you may say that's a great idea. Some of you may flag stuff about it that I hadn't thought of yet, that we're about to step on a landmine or something like that. And it's about, it's not very Big Brother. I said that. It's exactly what you said I wasn't going to say. It's not very Big Brother. It's actually scoring employees. So this actually started with metrics. I hate metrics. I think we all have really terrible metrics, so I generally just don't offer any metrics. That's really good, by the way, just to avoid the whole problem. But one of the ones that I projected I'd like to be able to do was the security status of different objects. And I've said like data center, like servers and kit, and humans was one of them. And so what I envisioned was having this global map that would show where our staff are, because that alone a lot of people don't really get their head around. Like when you're talking cybersecurity at the board level, it's good to note there's a lot of people in Kuala Lumpur, and seeing a bunch of little stick figure icons right there makes sense. But then I wanted to shade them and show that not only are there a lot of people in Kuala Lumpur, but they're 80% red. So what the hell does that mean? And that's what birthed this whole idea. So we have this score. It's 0 to 100. It's, so it corresponds to like letter grades. And we've just did our first run of it. And the components right now, there's two. The main one is fish testing. So we run continuous fish testing. We cut it into batches, and we roll campaigns every 2 weeks, and we do about 400 people every 2 weeks. So there's fish testing, and then the other piece is the security awareness training, which we're always beating people up to take, but like how much of a stick do I really have at the end of the day? And it's a lot of time to chase people to actually comply and do the training. And it's internal training we actually make. It's not just some little placard thing. But on the fish testing, we have this kind of spectrum of behavior when you get a fish. And the best thing you could do is report it. The next step you could do is ignore it. So that's okay, but it's not as good as reporting it. And the next bad thing, as you move into the bad side of the spectrum, it's clicking a link is bad. Running an executable is worse. And we say that entering data, sensitive data, into an actual form is even worse than that. And so we have this scoring that for every single fish test gives you a score of how you performed. Right now we average all of them over the period. So what we've been running is the prior year. But we're going to have that in a portal where people could run any period they want. But the year will generally be it because it'll be used at the end of the year at performance reviews. So if you fail one and have a crappy score, your route to redemption is to get more tests fired at you. And we do that anyway because we like to true up people and see that they've had corrective behavior. We tell people when they fail to fish anyway. So right now that's the lion's share. Then on the awareness training, it's, hey, if you took it on time, that's great. If you took it late but only 7 days late, that's not so great. And if you didn't do more than 7, then we absolutely hate you and it's terrible. And so we merge it together. The next steps that we'll do, so that alone is really interesting. And then we add in the complexity. So every fish test, we figure out the percentage of people who failed it. So I mentioned, I think, five dispositions out of a fish test. 3 of those are considered failure. So clicking a link, running an attachment, or entering data, those are all failure. We take the percentage of people who failed each campaign, and we use that to rate the difficulty. So if everybody failed the damn thing, then we're not going to be as punitive about the fact that you failed it, which gets ahead. It's like an automated way to get ahead of the, hey, I got my bonus docked, and I got this ultra-sophisticated red team campaign, and so-and-so failed a really dumb one, and they have the exact same outcome from that. Yeah, it's grading on a curve, and it's automated, which makes it a little more defensible. Did I mention we're in the private sector? Yeah, this wouldn't scale very well in a lot of industries. So before I go into like what we want to add onto it, any thoughts at that point or things similar that people have done with any success?
I want to see some visualizations.
It's a turbo talk, damn it. Jerry? Oh, that's interesting. So I'll segue that into what we're going to add into it because that's part of it. But I hadn't thought about like for the sake of forgiveness.
Or even want access to data by employee. Right?
Well, yeah. So and maybe it's the same answer for both of those things. So and the visualization too. So the visuals on this that we use internally One is a distribution of scores, like a frequency chart within buckets of 10. And you see that there's a bunch in like the 70s and up, and then there's a little bump right before 50, and there's a small tail. So what we do with the data is the next step, and it allows us to draw a line. Not us, actually. It allows the president of the company and HR to draw a line and decide the carrots and sticks that come out of that. And so generally we found, like right now, under the 50th percentile, there's like 1% of staff. So that's a pretty tenable, small group to say they need some kind of education here, something remedial, which works out pretty well. But part of the data, so you know how this is in a corporate environment. Sounds great. Okay, let's do this. Where do we get our data? Where's our golden record? Just of getting employees, right? But we got that. And one of the columns that we've added is we have a fairly rigid structure of job classifications. People don't know that because we got a million titles like all of you. You know, there's VP of this, SVP of that, SVP that we acquired 3 years ago that's really a lowest level employee possible, all that. But in the back end, HR has these really hard lines, like individual contributor, manager, director. And so for every employee row, we've populated the highest ranking of each of those that's above them so that we can get cuts of the data by senior VP or by VP. So at the level where there's only 20 of these people, we could say, hey, 20 people, here's the scores of your reports all the way down the tree. And my thought, we haven't delivered that one yet. It'll be next week, 2 weeks from now. My expectation is that the lowest level will say, well, I want to improve my score. And the first thing they do is pivot, and they see their reports who've contributed to that. And that manager in Manila is weighing down the whole damn group with his 85 call center people. But my point to Jerry, to yours, is that we could do a cut any way we want. So we could say, all right, well, let's see how you rank by sales or any AD group like that. Yeah. So we do our training on that. We have 5 classifications. There's a Gen Pop, and then there's a privileged access, customer facing, which is exactly what you're talking about, Jerry, and then executive admins. And part of that was regulatory drive, you know, how life is like they give you bad ideas and you try to translate them to something productive. So they want to differentiate testing, and then we try to differentiate along lines so it would actually be meaningful. So we have those populations identified, but I hadn't thought about delivering the results along those. Makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
How long have you had this implemented?
We've been working on the algorithm for 5 months, something like that. But we got our live data a month ago.
And is that live data as your first test, or has that been after some of this?
We have historical fish tests to feed it, so we didn't have to do the testing just to drive the data. It was just the analysis of the results that's new.
What do you anticipate being the amount of improvement you get in phishing responses versus the 5 months you spent developing the analytics?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I can only answer literally. It's just anticipation, isn't it? I think it's going to be great. I really do. Maybe that's cultural, but I mean, I think at our company, saying that you're in the bottom 1% will not only directly affect them, but telling management that these people have to go because of that works at our company. I mean, they already are saying cybersecurity is the most important thing, and they're kind of feeling like, okay, great, what do I do with that? And now it'll be that person that was on the fence. We want to get them off the fence.
So have you developed a custom system to track all this? Or are you just doing it in a spreadsheet? How are you tracking?
Yeah, it's all Python, and the actual data is in a MySQL database at the moment. But we have a little infrastructure that we use for vulnerability management, a few different data, AppSec, finding, tracking, all that kind of stuff. So we can reuse a lot of the same tables like the employees themselves, the awareness training, tracking, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that had to be built, though.
Have you done any analytics of the types of particular roles that might fall to particular phishing campaigns, and then customizing the remediation of that? So, like, hey, this particular group always falls for DocuSign Phish, and I'm going to provide them specific training for DocuSign Phish, versus these people fall for mouse spam, versus all the different types of campaigns.
We don't have enough data to do that yet. And one of the problems is that when we shifted to doing 400 tests every 2 weeks, one of the reasons is that if you blast the whole company with the same campaign, you run into some technical controls, just volume-based stuff. But you can unwind that once you learn. Then you run into some social issues where, like, if your campaign is a fake HR thing, then HR catches wind and they announce the whole company, hey, that wasn't really us, it's a fish, beware. And then you get bad test results. And then finally you get the herd mentality, right, of people all talking. So when we broke it up, we pepper it geographically. So as a result, I don't know that we have the consistency of data to say, like, so the DocuSign may have only gone to 2 salespeople net. But over time, that would be a good idea for analysis.
Or you have salespeople and endpoint people who literally open every document sent to them because that's their job, especially from strangers.
Well, part of this is that we all have biases, and I have my own, subjective ideas about what are going to be the conclusions, and I got to fight the tendency to just create something to support all of my assumptions. So, like I mentioned, call centers, right? So obviously, I think call center people are a massive liability. So I'm going to mine this data until it proves that. And I really got to remove myself from it, and maybe those people are great, and that has to be a possible outcome, or this isn't very objective. And so the other data points, just to wrap it up, that are next. The next one is, so we use a tracking system for incidents like everyone else, and we severity classify them like everybody else. And once you get from, so SEV 5 is informational, non-interesting. SEV 1 is the end of the world. So we're adding fields to that for kudos, and it took a long time to find diplomatic language, but basically offenders. So if somebody contributed and they were the one who actually executed the malware that went on to whatever, they can get tagged in there. So your contribution to a very bad event will echo, but it can be washed out by the kudos. And the general idea is, like, if you accidentally email a spreadsheet to RBC instead of RBS, there's a lot of like name issues in financial services, but you self-report, it'll wash out. So we want to encourage that. But if the person next to you has to report it, that's pretty bad news, right? And it probably sabotage that relationship. And then the last thing is passwords. So we started doing password cracking, and we're moving to, for expirations, we're moving from 90 days to a year to blah, 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 to expire on crack. So just running a cracking routine at all times, and as soon as it gets cracked, you get expired. So you might have to change it every damn week until you make a good password. So how often you end up getting it cracked will feed into that as well. So we ran it, and the guys are like, hey, well, I need to buy this rig to do cracking. I'm like, well, I don't want to be too good about this. So they start with the most commodity box possible, and they crack like 60% of the company in 4 hours. Meeting the requirements that we have today, complexity requirements, but just shitty passwords.
Oh, you just answered my question. I wanted to know how you did what gear you used.
Yeah, it's not even interesting, whatever the actual gear. It wasn't necessary. And I'm glad, because otherwise it would have been 100% or 99% or something. There's always a point where you could do that, right? And doing that was more complicated than like everything, because like in Windows, what we want to do is be able to kind of adhere to the NIST guidelines. So to get there, we're going to ultimately increase the length, but kill a lot of the complexity requirements, and then use the Kraken to just regulate it in that way. But one of the things we have to inject is dictionary checking, both because it works well and it's good, and that directly counters the cracking, but also that's spelled out in NIST, so we can't just take the easy parts of NIST and not the hard parts. And we have to do some, we just learned about this, about password filter DLLs that you could customize on Windows, and you can implement very, very strict logic. I detected the domain controller side. So you could say things like this complexity unless it's over 14 characters, and then we lessen the requirements, and you can integrate that all into it. So right now we've rolled out the cracking, making people bounce it, but we haven't been able to relax the 90 days yet. And so I just told everybody, and our communication says everything I just described. And so guys are saying, that's not true. You're saying that they can keep the password a long time if it's strong, and we're still expiring in 90 days. That's all right. You got 89 days to solve that problem before the first ones start rolling.
Did you think of that yourself, or where'd you get the idea?
Oh, I think you said I'd pick them out myself. I thought you meant like the dictionary list. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure someone else has thought of it, but I'm innocent of stealing it from them. It's just a. You're the only one I know who actually does it. Oh yeah? Has anybody else? Or a lot of people crack passwords, I guess. So another little niggle to actually doing it is that you can't. I shouldn't say can't. I'm sure you can if you know how to do things, and I don't. But to reset the password, you can't change someone's password sustainably to. You can't like say, okay, this person's cracked. Let's change their expiry date to 14 days from now. It seems like you'd be able to, but I mean, you could make a unique policy called 14 days and apply it to them. But you want to have unique roll dates so that not everybody in the office all has to change a password on the same day. So you'd make a million password policies. You'd have one per. So what we actually, and we wanted to do it because you want to not expire it now. You want to expire it in 7 days so that they get the warnings and the stuff we normally do for password expiry. But you can't do any of that. So we're having to manually do all of that. So we'll say, we add them, they're cracked. Now we send them the manual warning, whereas normally our system would automatically say, we have to generate a manual job that goes out and says, hey, you're cracked, here's the spiel, it'll be 7 days from now. And then in that 7 days, we have a job that just kills it at that moment. You can expire a password instantly. You just can't set it to expire in 14 days. That's a hurdle that you have to get past to do it. Any thoughts?
Aside from additional training for your employees, are you doing anything else with this data? Like, or the only path out of this, you're 100, whatever the riskiest score there is. It's just training.
Well, and firing and compensation cuts. So this is new that we're doing scoring, but we've been doing fish testing a long time. And 2 or 3 years ago, we haircut bonuses for people who had, let's say, failed a fish test. Now we get into the complexity, like how hard was it? You get into, did they click a link? Did they enter data? Did they enter FU security team? That's not really a failure. Really hard and unsustainable to do. That's why we've ultimately developed this algorithmic method. But we did do that, and we played it to the bone, and we haircut bonuses. And a lot of people just kind of put their tail between their legs, and we haircut them by 1.5% of the bonus. So it's not a lot of money at the end of the day. And we warned everybody 6 months in advance that it was going to be a 3% cut. And we used the same campaign for everyone back then for just the haircut, just for the bonus thing, regardless of what other campaigns we were running for operational reasons, right? So, and that everybody wanted to bring that back. So the quick answer is it's all cultural, and the things that work best for training and all that is really just about the company being on board at the highest levels. So my boss, who's the vice chairman, he's so into this kind of thing that he wants to bring back the haircut so aggressively for 2 years now. And I'm just thinking of all these edge cases that we're going to get burned on. Like I'm playing, lawyer here. So I've just been stalling, but now I feel like we could do something fairly defensible. And then carrots, too. The other end is, there's a cut at the top for the best people, which is pretty motivational. And the best thing I came up with now, which may just be me being entirely too nerdy, is a mechanical keyboard with the company logo on it. Because everybody gives out these terrible tchotchke keyboards that just suck. I was thinking like a DOS keyboard with the company logo for cybersecurity maven or whatever we're going to call them.
Who's in scope for this? In particular with the cuts to the bonus, is that all employees, including executives? Because 1.5% can be pretty big.
Well, yeah, but that 98.5% is even bigger.
Yeah, agreed. But is it employees?
But yeah, absolutely. So we've done an actual haircut once in the past. We're going to do it again. So I can only speak to that time. And it absolutely, I remember a lawyer getting really bent out of shape about it. And it was because of their record, right? They were all fixated on, this is going to be in my record. And they tried to say that, they lawyered. But we played it to the bone. Yeah. I've heard this story told a lot of times. Since we started talking about that, I've heard other people saying, people are haircutting bonuses over it. And, some people hate it, but most people love it. Regulators love it. They tell the story. Plays well. Yes. All right, cool. It looks like something else is kicking off. Thanks everyone.